when it comes to you back to being a talent, between 2022 and 2023. Of course, you had 2021 in which you worked in TI-10, but only as a as like a guest or something like that, or like an analyst for only that event. Um, what has undergone the biggest change for you, between 2022 and this year?
Uh, I think the biggest change has just been me finding more of my individual self brand wise and personality wise as a talent. I think the first year I was very focused on the mechanical aspects of it. Like I viewed it as building a skill set that would make me better at my job and what does that look like and improving those skills and trying to get that quality as high as possible. And this year, I think it was more about me just trying to bring more of myself and my personality and my humor and like these other more creative aspects to my job in terms of the brand, the individual personality, and the casting itself. And I think that has been very enjoyable and hopefully something that has also been fun for most viewers, which I think it has been. I think it's also something that can generate more divisiveness whenever you do that because it's just like you're doing something that makes you a more not extreme person, but a more standout personality, right? So basically, if you go in and I think if you do the talent job and you're like middle, you're just like very objective about everything. It's rare that that will generate a lot of extreme feedback, positive or negative, because there's not. It's like you're not saying anything crazy, right? If you go on and you just, it's. I always use like people. I think people talk about Kyle or Swindles a lot because I think Swindles was one of the first talent who really became very polarizing. He basically ramped up like he would just say things, he would say things very assertively, and I think that's good to do as a talent because it makes you more interesting, it makes you stand out, it makes you different. He wasn't afraid to just be horribly wrong repeatedly and make like a fool of himself to some degree. At the same time, it made him very polarizing, right? You suddenly went from a guy who was like most people really enjoyed watching him to like there's a coalition that absolutely hates him and there's this coalition that absolutely loves him and think all the talent should be more like him. And I think that happens kind of naturally no matter what, the more you bring out of yourself. Maybe there's a balance in the middle, but it's something I've noticed. Like the response is definitely amped up a bit as I've tried to bring more of myself into the cast and stuff. Some of it works, some of it definitely doesn't. Um, which is also something to judge based on the feedback. But I think it's an interesting part that has definitely been different this year than last year. Uh, is that like if I go on a cast, I can definitely feel that more people are responding to me being in the cast rather than just the cast itself, if that makes sense. Um, like I'm bringing some individual brand value or personality value to that product, as opposed to before where it was just there's a cast going on and I happen to be in it, but like do people know it's me casting or are they looking forward to me casting? Not necessarily. That has definitely changed. Um, I don't know to what degree, but I've definitely felt it, and so that is also something I try and work on more. And it is something that I've noticed is it's made my cast more polarizing to some degree. I think more people, the people that like them, maybe like it more. Like it feels more unique to them, and it's definitely created a larger group of people that are like, oh, I actually don't like this guy, or I don't like the way he says things, or the way he jokes about things, or whatever. I don't find it funny. I find him cringe, whatever, you know. But I think I'm also becoming more and more okay with that. Like I'd rather be polarizing than not be polarizing. I think. Not to say that I'm a very polarizing talent because I don't think I'm like Swindle's level or like Quinn as a player is very polarizing. Right? I don't think I'm not saying I'm at that level, but I think I'd rather just be me and like if people love or hate that, whatever.
Yeah, and in a sense, you could substitute polarizing and say like popular, because like when it comes to the things that you described, building a brand, building an audience, that then leads to how people view your work, be it a player or a caster, talent creator, content creator, whatever. It's an interesting subject that about building a brand in a game such as Dota 2. I've talked to plenty of people that have focused into building a brand besides, their work within the game. Examples. Slacks twice, and then I talked to
Hmm.
Saberlight about his his turn or his comedic side of himself, and it's
Right.
something that he was been focusing on, for a little while. And about that, you mentioned in your previous answer that there's a sense of divisiveness towards that line in particular. Why do you think that that's the case?
Uh, I think it's just because whenever you take, basically, when you build up your brand and personality, I think a big core of it is you're taking stronger stances on ideas or opinions. And whenever you do that on the internet, you're bound to basically pull out more haters who like not necessarily hate on you, but they disagree with those very strong opinions. So I think Dota is also a very divisive game in terms of you can view the game a lot of ways, and a lot of people can have a lot of confidence in their ideas or their viewpoints that aren't necessarily 100% accurate. Not that that makes them wrong, but Dota, like the more I played it for almost 10 plus years now, Dota's not necessarily about being right or wrong. It's about how much you can extract from your ideas and make them useful. And that can come from anywhere. It can come from a terrible idea, it can come from a great idea. But a lot of people are stuck in their methodology of, I think my way of viewing this situation is correct. So like it can happen objectively, it can happen subjectively, but you can talk about how, let's say I go on a draft panel and I can do that draft panel two ways. I can do that draft panel where I say like I just give an analysis of the heroes and what they could do and what a team might use them for. And I think that would be a very objective way to do it, and it would be a very unpolarizing way to do it because there's not much to disagree with, right? I can be like, okay, they pick Crystal Maiden. They're gonna probably try and use this Crystal Maiden to push out waves and control more of the map. That's something they can look for. That's what they're trying to do with the hero. Very unpolarizing. There's not many people are going to be like, well, I completely disagree with this guy's analysis of what this hero can do because, I mean, it's just what the hero can do, right? But if I go on that draft analysis and I want to make it more polarizing and I say like this Maiden pick is absolutely terrible. It has like, absolute dog win rate. There's no reason they should be picking this hero. This hero has no place in the meta. Whatever it is, right? Even if you want to make it more polarizing analysis, like I think the only use this hero has is to max frostbite and go kill creeps in the jungle. That would be like a very polarizing view of the hero. Then you're probably going to make a lot of people either happy or angry at that because it might pan out in the game, it might not. You go and play this game, maybe the Crystal Maiden doesn't even skill Frostbite and doesn't hit a single creep. Well, then do you look stupid? Do you look like a fool? If you do that enough, do you end up as a talent where people say, like, this guy doesn't know what he's talking about? He just says crazy things that make no sense, right? Then all of a sudden you're becoming a very polarizing talent because now you're just like saying very strong ideas that people are going to disagree with in any capacity. Whether that person's right or whether you're right, it almost doesn't matter. You're just creating a situation where there's disagreement and the debate can't really happen because it's a one-way street, right? Like,
It's interesting you bring that up because there's been occasions in which a caster talks about like a composition for a game. And this is another game that I'm going to bring up, and how a certain team is not going to do well, or a certain composition is not going to do well, and then the opposite ends up happening,
mhm,
and then leads to the audience, lambasting or just piling on to that person,
yes.
a caster. An obvious example is Sideshow from Valorant. I'm not sure if you're familiar with that game, but he's a caster that, as time and again, brought in his takes as to how the competitive scene is going to play out, or how an agent composition is going to play out in a given map and also in a given match, given
Mm,
in a given team, etc., etc. But instead of him taking in the criticism or the response from the crowd and also his peers in a negative light, he has turned it into like in a comedic way in which people are calling him like a clown, or something like that, and then he just buys into it, and it
mhm.
sort of puts him in a sort of like um it puts him like in a endearing light, as like a as like as like someone who is knowledgeable about the game, and although he might not be correct within his line of thinking, it then leads it still brings about a sense of community, and it's also a sense of like um relaxation and also discussion, whatever
Mhm.
the case, be it positive or negative, about him and also the things that he's talking about. It's very prevalent in games like Valorant and also League of Legends and other titles. And I feel like that's not, and I feel like from how you described it, it's not really the case in Dota 2. One has to go about it a particular way, just so that they won't receive like plenty of criticism, like negative criticism and stuff like that. Do you feel like that sort of difference exists between Dota and other games, or not?
I think there is some innate difference. I think that's a very good example of what I was talking about in a sense of if you're willing to make that part of your personality, you can and you can like go down that road, but you kind of have to be happy with that outcome, right? Like maybe you have to be happy with being a person who can make that like clowniness or being wrong endearing, but you have to be okay with that. And this is actually something that me and Cap talked about a lot for me as an analyst. I remember having multiple discussions with him at certain points in terms of as a Dota analyst, is it better if I say things that I know of like a higher degree of being true but are safer, or is it better if I say things that are a lower degree of being true in the game but are more decisive? Um, so like going back to that example, right? I could say, you know, I think, like I could say the same thing two ways. I can say, I think the best way for them to take this team fight is they jump the backline. That's one statement. I can also say that statement in terms of like the only way they're going to win this team fight is if they jump the line in the back. They need vision on the line. They have to jump the line. There's no other way they can win a team fight. That's a more that's a more decisive version of that same statement. Maybe by a slight margin, but it is, right? Because what can happen is we play that game and maybe they don't jump the back line at all. Maybe they don't jump the line at all, right? They just go in to the team fight face first, and my statement looks horribly incorrect. So what that does is it does it devalue me as an analyst, right? Because I made a prediction, the prediction was horribly wrong. Now the viewers are like, "Oh, this guy said they have to do this and they didn't, and they clearly didn't, and they still won." Well, that he's like he doesn't know what he's talking about, right? But what it can also do is it can set up a situation where then you can be like, "Damn, I didn't think they could win that team fight doing like that." And here's how they did it, and that's even more interesting because it surprised me, right? And now I'm learning with you as a viewer, and it creates a situation where even I, as an analyst, can be wrong about something or misread the situation, and it leads to us all discovering something cool in the game that we didn't think was there, and that creates a story. And like something we talked about is that that's a better end situation than just being conservative on all of your opinions or predictions, because then you're not setting anything up. You're not setting up a surprise or like a crazy outcome or something that none of us saw. Because if I don't see something and it surprises me genuinely, then it's probably something really cool. And if I set it up for like that, that's better, even at my own expense. The issue in Dota compared to other games, I think, is that when you start doing that a lot, Dota's a very knowledge-based game, and a lot of your value as a player, coach, professional, whatever it is, and that bleeds over into the talent side as an analyst, is how much you know about the game and how much you're right in a sense of like, if you can go on and predict even something as simple as predicting a draft pick is like, boom, 10 head explosions. Everyone's like, oh, this guy's like Dota god, right? Because he went on there and predicted a draft pick. But in actuality, it's like, okay, like that's cool. It is a valuable trait. It does create something interesting for the broadcast. But at the same time, it's is it like is it equally as impressive as it is equally bad if someone goes up on there and can't predict a draft pick, right? Does that mean they're suddenly not a good talent because they don't possess that knowledge? And I think a lot of times in Dota, it's viewed as like you need a certain minimum amount of knowledge to be good at it, and then there's some leeway. But the more and more knowledge you have is just a better and better thing. And so the second you start to devalue that, it's viewed very negatively. Um, and that's where I go back to your example, right? If I put myself in a position as a talent or an analyst where I start to laugh at myself in terms of my being wrong on every prediction or my not knowing what's going to happen in this game. Like if I go on draft panel and I predict 100 picks in a row and they're all incorrect and it becomes a meme and, oh, this guy's every prediction he makes is wrong, haha. I can make that into my brand. I can make it endearing. I can claim it as my own, and it'll make me a more interesting personality. But I do think there's a portion of the Dota community that'll be like, this guy actually gets a lot of stuff wrong, and I don't know if I trust his analysis because at the core of it, Dota is a very analytical game. Like, there's a huge amount of stats, there's a huge amount of drafting and meta strategy. There's macro strategy, there's micro strategy, there's laning, there's team fighting, there's itemization. There's so many detail-oriented components that having someone who's knowledgeable on that and brings the confidence in that knowledge it's just like it goes back to what I said. It's like the cornerstone of any analyst, right? That has to be there to some capacity. And so that's a balancing act. Like, how much can you maintain the confidence that I know what I'm talking about and I'm very smart and I've studied this game, and also joke about it and be endearing and like, hey, sometimes I don't know, or I fucked up or whatever, right? You have to, like, I think you want to be somewhere at, the 2/3 of the middle or whatever that looks like. It probably varies from person to person. Like someone like Jenkins can be more clowny, right? And mess around. Someone like a Seb or Faith Beyond might want to be more analytical and not joke around as much and just play more off the fact that they're like knowledge gods of the game. I think that's perfectly fine, right? You can build personality on either side of that.